Up next, Authentically Detroit discusses the wave of gun violence currently plaguing the city. But first, this week's hot takes from Bridge Detroit. Detroiters reclaim Earth Day for environmental justice, and Detroit Reparations Task Force starts with baby steps. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit starts after these messages.
Founded in 2021, the Stoudemire is a membership-based community recreation and wellness center centrally located on the east side of Detroit. Membership in the Stoudemire is available on a sliding scale for up to $20 per year or 20 hours of volunteer time. The Stoudemire offers art, dance, and fitness classes, community meetings and events, resource fairs, pop-up events, the neighborhood tech hub, and more. Members who are residents of the east side have access to exclusive services in the Wellness Network. Join today and live well, play well, be well. Visit ecndetroit.org.
Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that ask the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit, by Detroiters, for Detroiters.
Hey, y'all, it's Orlando. We just want to let you know that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast episode are those of the co-hosts and guests and not their sponsoring institutions. Now, let's start the show. Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from Midtown at the WDET studios. We are a content partner to bridgedetroit.com. I'm Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Givens-Davidson.
Thank you for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people in the city of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. It's just Donna and I in the studio this week. Donna, how was this cold, very strangely cold Monday with snow and rain and everything in between finding you?
Well, you know, it's of course odd to go outside when it's 41 degrees and it feels like 33 degrees according to weather.com. I'm like, is this me or is it cold? So,
cold,
you know, it's but it's Michigan. And I remember I used to be a track mom and have to go to track meets in this type of weather in April. And also when two of my children graduated from the University of Michigan, we were sitting out in the stadium in this kind of weather, in the big house, in the cold. So cold Aprils aren't new. What was new was last week. Woo, that was nice. How about you, Orlando?
Oh, I'm doing well. A busy Monday, but what Monday is it? Isn't a busy one. But over the weekend, I did have the opportunity to go to a track meet. My nephew runs track for Grosse Pointe North. I can't believe he is in high school already. His father, my brother, is incarcerated. So I'm always happy to step in and support. He won his dash. I think it was a 200-meter dash. He won. And he may be getting promoted to varsity because right now he's in JV. He's a freshman at Grosse Pointe North. So that was fun. And then baby and I got to go on a date. So we hung out later on Saturday evening at San Marello. San Marello has this black shell pasta with like a tomato-based sauce and lobster meat. Honest to God, it was the best pasta I've ever had in my life. Wow. And they're like, we do it all by hand. Like they make the pasta there by hand from scratch. And so I've had, a fantastic weekend outside in the sun, and I still managed to get my laundry done. So I'm doing good. I'm doing well.
That's good.
My house smelled like fabric softener. It's the best.
I had a kind of busy weekend. On Saturday, we went to try to remove some of my mother's final things. This is, the final countdown before we put the house on the market. Mm-hmm. And so I was there going through some papers, and I found this little workbook that my grandmother had written in talking about her childhood. But I was sitting in these rooms crying, just looking at stuff, looking at old pictures. And it's really creepy because there's this one picture of my mother when she's about my age, and I'm looking at it like I'm looking at myself, and I'm just really thrown.
We've all been saying this, though. It's like You and your mom, the resemblance is literally uncanny.
But normally she has not worn her hair like mine, right?
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but she had her hair pulled back, and it just really messed me up in the head. It was good though. I mean,
Did you feel them with you while you were there?
I did, and I saw pictures of them, joyous pictures of them from so many things, and so it's interesting. What I realized what my sister used to do is she would take pictures from Facebook and she'd print them out and put them in an album.
Nice.
So she has an album of,
And we don't do that anymore.
Significance of
Yeah.
family, the way that she captured all of her family in these albums. Don't get me started because I might start crying. I don't like doing that. But I left there and I went to the Bog Center, and they had an art exhibit, and the artist had an artist talk. It was really deep. It was one of those deep talks, like if he was talking about my identity is energy, and I was like, okay, I had to put on my deep hat for this because I just can't readily access light from that.
My identity is energy.
I'm telling you, he was,
Was he a poet too?
he was something. It was like,
poet
yes,
and
he's
he
poet.
didn't know it.
Well, he is a Boggs kid. He's a Detroit summer kid, and they're just taught to think more deeply about the world in ways that some of us. And I'm a concrete Virgo thinker, so everything has to make sense. My identity is all of these concrete things.
We are cerebral and literal thinkers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this was like, it was a stretch, but I enjoyed it. And then on Sunday, I went to see our friend Phyllis Edwards give the Women's Day talk at Bailey Temple. It was phenomenal. It's so great to see her.
Bailey Cathedral?
No.
Oh.
Now, you say Bailey Cathedral. Let me explain this to you. We went to Bailey Cathedral, Church of God in Christ
Right,
first.
Kojic. That's what I'm like thinking. Like
Walked
John
in,
H.C.
Walked in. Nobody was in there. We were like, this might be. Kevin was like, well, I think we're Kojic late. Kevin's Kojic. We're Kojic late. No, we're Kojic early. So maybe everybody's coming. I was like, no, this is just not the right venue. So I looked back, and it's actually Bailey Temple Church of God in Christ.
Okay.
And that's in Southwest Detroit, but there's two Baileys, right?
Yeah.
And so Phyllis is a member of Bailey Temple.
Kojic. Okay.
And
I know she killed that.
Oh, she did.
I wish I had known.
She posted and she sent it, and I was like, I really want to go because I just admire her, and I knew she was going to do a great job.
And you guys are doing work with Phyllis now, right?
We are. Phyllis is coming on to provide some support for our housing work.
Yeah.
I would have gone either way, but it was really special knowing, just because a lot of times as leaders, when people graduate from leadership and move into a different realm, they don't always get the stage, but she got it. She deserved it. And, so we should have her on here and have her talk.
I can't believe we've not had Phyllis Edwards on the podcast. And so, number one, we sorry. Number two, you invited Phyllis.
Right. So,
because I know she listens. She, of course, Phyllis Edwards is bringing the Women's Day message. She's something. Wow.
She brought a message about power and faith and how to connect with God. And she had it all worked out. But it was really good. She did. She had it all worked out. I was feeling it and seeing it, and brought in so much other messaging that is important for us to hear. And so, I really, really appreciated that. And it gave me a really full weekend.
Mm-hmm. And for those of you who don't know, Phyllis Edwards is the now former executive director of Bridging Neighborhoods, Inc. Bridging Communities, Inc.
Yeah.
Sorry. Was able
former
to do
chair of CDAD.
All of the things. She came off the CDAD board too? Dang.
I don't know if she's the chair of CDAD. I don't think she is. I think Antoine Jackson is the chair right now.
Oh, he's now the chair? Okay.
Yeah, but she's a former chair of CDAD, a long time former chair, very involved in so many movements, and a person who has pushed for the rights of people who are unhoused, as well as the rights of seniors, and just taking care of our seniors. And
is vocal and unapologetic.
Vocal, unapologetic, and also a lot of fun.
Yeah, she is fun.
We do love her.
We love you, Phyllis. You're invited, okay? You're invited. All right, it is time for Hot Takes, where we run down some of the week's top headlines here in the city of Detroit. For Hot Takes, Detroiters reclaim Earth Day for environmental justice. We kind of had a conversation about this last week. This is Jenna Brooker, our guest from last week. She was reporting Earth Day was first celebrated more than 50 years ago, heralding an era that saw the first federal laws and agencies to enforce pollution regulations and protect the environment. But it was also a white-led movement with decades of green activism coming from major environmental organizations founded by white men. The event itself was also founded by a white man, former United States Senator Gaylord Nelson of Wisconsin. Even today, the environmental movement remains white-led across 43 environmental foundations and non-governmental organizations. There was an average of 4 times more white staff than people of color in 2020, according to a Green 2.0, an independent advocacy organization that releases an annual gender and race report card for environmental movement. This year, as several city organizations plan inaugural Earth Day celebrations, they are aiming to reclaim the day for Black and Brown Detroiters. Black Detroiters have long been at the forefront of the environmental movement here, going back to Donnell Wilkins, who was at the table in 1991 when the 17 Principles of Environmental Justice was created, the foundational document for the national environmental justice movement. Black labor organizers who formed the League of Revolutionary Black Workers were also instrumental in the movement. And on April 19th, the Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition will host a Reclaiming Earth Day event at Two Birds in West Village, the organization's first Earth Day event. The event will offer an opportunity to meet people in environmental justice work and to get involved. Emery Hurdle, a director at the coalition, said this: Earth Day would be different than any other. The biggest difference is the audience and who we're honoring, primarily Black Detroiters and our elders from the movement, especially as that's compared to environmental efforts that are more traditionally focused around old racist white men from the conservation era that have problematic histories with them. Donna, I know you love this. What say you?
You know, I do love this. Let me sink my teeth into it. So environmentalism and environmental justice are not the same thing. Environmentalism is chiefly concerned with protecting the environment against the destruction by humans. And the way that we protect the environment can cause destruction to some humans for the protection of other humans. In fact, it frequently does. So when you look at oil refineries and removing lead from gas, where is that happening? At the Marathon refinery in Detroit. Who is that poisoning? The people who live near. But we all benefit, so-called, from improved air quality, except for the people who are experiencing worsened air quality. In environmentalism, you have the ability to ignore the harmful impacts of even your best projects, like the creation of a battery, for example. All of this electric vehicle formation sounds really good, and it is good. I mean, I believe in electric vehicles, but where do we source the materials that are in the battery? Where does that lithium come from? How are the workers who are sourcing those materials protected from environmental harm? How are their communities protected from mining harm?
And where does the electricity come
where
from?
does the electricity and also, where are those batteries made, and how do you stop the kind of harm that takes place there? If we're talking about justice, then we have to say we've got to stop producing environmental harms, not distributing them and hiding them in Black and brown communities, because we are more exposed. Black people are more exposed to environmental toxins than any other people in the U.S., with the possible exception of Native Americans. You know, we don't talk about that because they're not being exposed in the U.S. They're being exposed on tribal lands that are not formerly the U.S., and that's where they're dealing with uranium and all of the uranium mining crap. But when you look at the air quality, PM2, which is one of the big toxins that is impacting health, Black people are so much more exposed than other people. And yet, we have not been at the forefront of that movement in Detroit. When they put the whole incinerator in Detroit, the people who fought the incinerator were white people, and the people who fought for the incinerator were Black politicians, because the incinerator was supposed to be producing energy, and it was going to produce revenue to close income gaps. And it was being sold based on a false promise that you could do all of this and not harm the environment. I think that
we knew that to be a lie, right over the 75 overpass on I-94.
And yet, when people talk about the most polluted area of the city of Detroit, they always say 48217 and ignore the fact that we have an incinerator sitting next to U.S. Ecology, sitting next to I-94, and all of these things are contributing to the worst asthma rates in the state. In 48214 zip code area, and 48213 zip code area, and 48215 zip code areas. And by the way, that's in southeast Detroit. And so I think that the EPA came to Detroit last year and said, we're interested in looking at air quality issues in Southeast Detroit. And I was like, really? So we took them on a tour. And of course, I took them to my favorite place, the new Crown Enterprises Stellantis Truck and Logistics
I
Center.
thought you were
and
going
I
to
said,
say
look
the
at this.
Hamilton Outdoor Range.
Well, you know what?
Your sarcasm
was
is
my
hilarious.
sarcasm today, because I feel so passionately about the fact that
Yeah.
we allowed this to happen. So on Earth Day, I think it's important for us to understand a lot of things. First of all, let's not get environmentalism and environmental justice confused.
It's an important distinction.
It is.
It is. It really is. You know what it sort of reminds me of? It reminds me of, like, the suffrage movement and women and, women's rights, but, not black women. And then, black women and the wave of the different waves of feminism and how, that has been co-opted by many different communities that still exclude black women. And here we're talking about, like, this really important distinction that to the naked eye or the uneducated ear, it sounds the same. It sounds like it's both things should be fought for, but you make an important distinction around adding that word justice.
If you don't add the word justice, then you end up in trouble. A new friend, a woman named Rose Hackman. I don't know if you know Rose.
I don't.
Rose just published a book called Emotional Labor. Now, she's a white woman who is a journalist who published a book talking about emotional labor, which I guess is a big thing. I'd never heard of it before, Rose. But it's talked about among a lot of women that women have to do a lot of emotional labor inside the workforce. And it makes sense. We're not compensated for,
Social
playing
workers,
these roles,
teachers,
the listening ear,
nurses,
and all of that.
Yeah.
But what she points out in this book, which I think is amazing, is the extractive emotional labor that is imposed on black women. That black women have served as cooks and nannies and mammies and every other kind of thing. And yet white women say, well, no, that's not emotional labor because they're being paid for it.
Oh, no.
And so a woman can go to work and get paid and hire an underpaid, undocumented person to do work in her home and take care of her children and listen to her crying children and do everything that makes her life easier. But, so, was it Sojourner Truth saying, ain't I a woman?
Ain't I a woman? But you want to know, what's really interesting about Jenna's approach to this is I think she wants to surface a new personification of the environmental justice narrative, right? And rightfully so, make sure that black folks are at the forefront of that. Of that illustration.
And I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. And that's something that we're doing at Eastside Community Network, right?
I mean, I only really know black folks who have done this work because that's my frame. My frame comes from ECN, and it's nothing but black folks doing that work.
And let's give Donnell her roses.
Donnell, yeah.
Let's give
Green Door Initiative.
Green
Detroit
Door
is working
Initiative,
for environmental
but also
justice.
Joanne Watson,
And, yeah.
her roses, because Joanne Watson helped draft those 17 principles.
Yeah.
There are black women who've been doing the work in the silence and in the shadows, because as a political body,
Reverend,
look at the Black Democratic Party agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we're going to talk about this soon. Look at the reparations movement and tell me if we see environmental justice anywhere front and center in those movements. And yet you can't live without air, water, and soil to grow food. So the reality is that we have been sidelined. Environmental justice itself has been sidelined by the black civil rights and political machine in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
that's real.
And so what we're trying to do, and I'm really excited about it, through our Eastside Climate Action Coalition, we have really built activism around it. And we have 40, 50, 60 people showing up at our meetings. We're going to have some new commercials inviting people to our coalition meetings where we are making demands on the city and the state and others to clean up the places that we live, so that environmental justice is made real. And of course, we're doing that in partnership with Sandra Turner Handy and Donnell Wilkins and all of the mothers of the movement who've been doing it before it was popular.
Shout out to Sandra Turner Handy,
right.
longtime Denby neighborhood resident and activist, and just a fierce advocate for young people and environmental justice. And people I don't know, like Rhonda Anderson. We got to speak these names
right.
more.
Let's pull some names thumbs up.
Yeah.
Because these are people who, before things get cool, people are standing for it and
they've
fighting
been
for
doing
it and in the trenches. And so I always like to lift them up because they are just wonderful human beings, and also because it's about damn time we did it. I don't know if we have to put a little warning on that because I said damn.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We've said worse. Listen, we're going to take a quick break, but we are coming back with one more hot take around Detroit Reparations Task Force and their first meeting that they had last week. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit. We'll be right back.
Have you always dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Detroit Eastside Engaged Podcast Network, or DEEP for short, is here to make that dream a reality. Located inside the Stoudemire, the DEEP Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your podcast idea off the ground. Doesn't take a whole lot of work to get started. Just visit the Authentically Detroit page at ecn-detroit.org or call Sarah at 313-948-0344.
Founded in 2021, the Stoudemire is a membership-based community recreation and wellness center centrally located on the east side of Detroit. Membership in the Stoudemire is available on a sliding scale for up to $20 per year or 20 hours of volunteer time. The Stoudemire offers art, dance, and fitness classes, community meetings and events, resource fairs, pop-up events, the Neighborhood Tech Hub, and more. Members who are residents of the east side have access to exclusive services in the Wellness Network. Join today and live well, play well, be well. Visit ecndetroit.org.
Welcome back to Authentically Detroit. Hot takes. Detroit Reparations Task Force starts with baby steps. This is Malachi Barrett at Bridge Detroit reporting. So Detroit's first reparations committee is asking residents for insight and stressing patience as it takes baby steps, in air quotes, toward developing programs to address systemic racism. A majority of city voters supported a ballot initiative establishing Detroit's Reparations Task Force in 2021, which met publicly for the first time Thursday after members were appointed by the city council earlier this year. Co-chairs Lauren Hood and Keith Williams said their vision for reparations isn't constrained to cash payments, but the conversation is just starting. The task force must release recommendations to the city council within 18 months of its first meeting, setting a target for October 2024. We're not talking about a one-time payout, but a paradigm shift in all kinds of policies and practices that govern Black communities, Hood said. In Detroit specifically, it requires a fundamental shift in priorities. Addressing past harms requires prioritizing the conditions of our people ahead of prioritizing the condition of our property. Some said reparations should include broad social supports. Suggested programs could address workforce training, pension repayments for city retirees who endure cuts through the city's bankruptcy, school investments, ensuring homes have clean drinking water, addressing the health risks of air pollution, and more. Others focus on what they described as another example of institutional harm against Black residents, the mass overassessment of Detroit homeowners from 2010 to 2016. Overtaxation sent thousands into debt and caused a wave of foreclosures and evictions. It's about cash, Detroit resident Tanae Hankins told the task force Thursday. Let me decide what to do. I stopped counting at $12,000 in terms of me being overtaxed. We could have sent our nephew to Morehouse with what we were overtaxed with. Efforts to repay illegally overtaxed residents face its own legal hurdles. Detroit city attorney says it's unconstitutional to issue direct payments to individuals. Kofi Kenyatta, senior policy director at Up Together, said the task force can't think small. Kenyatta said payments should be given with no strings attached. He also suggested investigating the harm caused by mortgage companies and financial institutions. He says our city has a long, painful history of discrimination against Black people. The time for reparations is long overdue. Donna, what you got to say?
I say that government is not going to figure out how to repair the harm done to us. And so I appreciate them setting this up, and it will at least get some dialogue going. But I'm reminded of the hero of all of ours, Frederick Douglass, and his words that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them, and these will continue until they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. We have put up with a whole lot over the centuries that we've been here. So when you talk about reparations, it's not going to come from government saying, hey, we don't have any money. We've got money for illages and money for other things. We don't have money for you, and we have laws that we won't change because we don't see them as necessary or valuable to change them. So we've got to demand it. And I think that what ends up happening is our power gets dissipated when government recruits us into these corridors of seeming power. We get to analyze and discuss without really coming up with clarity about what we want. If you were to ask any black person, what do they believe in reparations in Detroit? 9 out of 10 will tell you yes. When you ask people, what does that look like? We have not figured it out. And I think we need to figure it out and then take it to the committee rather than wait for the committee to figure it out and bring it to us. Because I promise you that when they figure it out and they bring it to us, it's going to be less than what we wish we had. They're going to carve out $1.8 million or some type of special program and say, well, that's progress. And it's not.
And then the city will be able to say, if it adopts it, that we gave reparations to Black Detroiters. I want to remind everybody that the task force must release recommendations. It doesn't mean that these recommendations will be adopted or codified in charter or even in law to the city council within 18 months of the first meeting. So that is October 2024.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to release recommendations, the kind of people that they will put on the task force and the kind of voices that will be listened to will either be marginalized in the process. And this is just my experience working in these circles.
Because we got the Reverend Joanne Watson on this task
and
force,
she's amazing. And she's absolutely amazing. And I know that she's going to push for things, but it's a coalition. Yeah. And so it's a coalition formed by city government. It's not formed by the people and taken to city government. And so, there's the political aspect of all of this. There is the optics of it. So when somebody is talking about baby steps and patience in the first paragraph, it's hard for me to really see this as a meaningful dialogue. Because
do you think it's strategy to sort of help manage people's expectations,
we're always
under promise, over deliver?
Isn't that what we always do with black people? We under promise and over deliver. The mayor won't come up with a housing plan because he doesn't want to exceed people's expectations that we're going to try to do something about housing. We always keep expectations low. We don't want people to want too much. We don't want people to expect too much. In fact, we call that an entitlement mentality. We want you to expect little, and then when you get it, you can be thankful and surprised. But here's my thinking. It's not about a lot or a little. It is about really figuring out, what do we want? And one of the questions I have is, do we want government to provide it, or are there ways for us to create systems and processes that take care of ourselves?
That was going to be my next question, because, is it reasonable to expect the actor of oppression to remediate the oppression that they have inflicted upon whole communities, instead of figuring out basically, like what you said, and I've been asking this question now for years, how to create our own circular economies and communities and enshrine it in policy to protect it, because we've done it before.
Exactly. And so if you know what your circular economy looks like, what your collective wealth building looks like, what your collective benefit looks like, and you understand the policy requirements to make that happen, then you go to government and say, here's the policies we want changed. You're not necessarily saying fund the whole thing, because it's not going to happen. You're not necessarily saying produce the whole thing because you don't want government to control it. But when you don't know what you're looking for, when you don't know what you're asking for, then what you're doing is you're asking government to come up with a solution. And I don't believe government is going to come up with a solution for the racism that government has imposed on black people. And this is not, talking about any elected official. It's not talking about anybody on that task force. I think it's great the task force exists.
The system that is the United States. That's what we're talking about.
And just the idea of self-empowerment, the fact that people have the power to do things for themselves. When I look at D-Town Farms, when I look at the Food Collective, when I look at all of these different efforts that have been taking place all over the city of Detroit, where people have taken upon themselves to create things, Oakland Avenue Farms, not asking permission, doing stuff, and then when there's city funds coming back and asking for it. Now, we can continue to do more, but there's a Detroit Food Policy Council. There are other mechanisms that are put in place to help facilitate this. I just think that reparations and this idea that we should sit back and wait for this task force to produce solutions to things is wrongheaded. while they're doing what they're doing, I think we need to do
both-hand
something
approach.
in the
Yeah.
community so that we have some specific asks to ask them prior to the publication of the report, hopefully, so
Yeah.
that, the report doesn't get published and it's like, oh, we have these 3 more things. But I still want to know, and I still want us to envision something that is, not small. I say dream big.
Yeah, I was sort of surprised around the baby steps comments too. It does sound, very political, because when we're especially when the voters overwhelmingly accepted and voted that this task force should be created, I think there is an expectation for big vision.
There is.
On part of Detroiters.
There is, but we are so conditioned to baby steps and managed expectations that we're afraid of the responsibility of having bigger expectations. And I think, again, that's how we tolerate injustice. That's how we tolerate it when we say, okay, well, if you can just help make marginal change, then that's going to be okay. And it's really okay for those of us who are not suffering. But if you're suffering, baby steps, that just reminds me.
Hear about baby steps.
There
that's
was
what MLK was talking about in the beginning of the I Have a Dream speech, about this check that has come back as insufficient funds. Well, he was essentially getting at and speaking to incrementalism.
Yes.
Right? And incrementalism doesn't work.
If not us, then who?
Yeah.
If not now, then when?
Yeah.
And he said that how many years ago? Was that 1968?
No,
1963. 1963. I don't even know why I was born 1963. It was 60 years ago, right? 60 years ago, he said, if not us, who? If not now, when? There's a whole different set of us. The grandchildren, great-grandchildren of us are now standing up and asking the exact same questions. And so I think let's encourage young people to dream big dreams.
Yeah.
Let's encourage our communities to dream big dreams. But that encouragement is not going to come from city government, because there's a price tag attached to that. And it's like, okay, big dreams. And we gave all
big
of our money
are
to
the
District of Detroit.
Big dreams aren't against
because
the law.
who gets to have big dreams? Illiches. They can have huge dreams. The form ability, they have huge dreams. They say, we're going to remake this part of the city. And they have these pretty pictures, and whether they do it or not, they sell us their big dreams every single time.
Oh, a segment of us, their big dreams. What's the other admonishment, I guess, that I have is that I think I know that Detroit has a stage to the world. I mean, we've learned this in our implementation of this podcast, right, Donna? We have listeners from all over the globe. I think right now, recognizing that Detroit is still the largest majority Black city in the United States, I think we have to carry that and carry this tension as we discuss reparations and the recommendations. So Simone Lightfoot says this all the time: Detroit is Big Mama. If Detroit goes, so goes the nation. I think that we just need to carry it, and we really need to be. Jamal was saying it too. Continue to be the mother of movement.
Right, exactly.
This is our legacy.
We are the we are the home.
Yeah.
Of the Nation of Islam.
Yeah.
We are the home of the Republic of New Africa. We're the home of Motown. We're the home of techno. We can be the home of other things too.
The home of the shrine.
The home of the shrine.
So,
and also, I don't remember the name of the denomination that the Shrine of the Black Madonna is, but we were the home of that. People innovated here and took it all over the United States. We are innovative, we're creative, we're powerful. And I think when we are willing to accept and own our own power,
step in that.
That's when we're going to see change. So I love to talk about reparations, but I don't love to talk about what can you give us, as opposed to what do we demand? How can we come together collectively to make a shared demand? Because we can change the world, but we have to believe it.
All right. If you have news items that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. All right. So over the last week, there were multiple instances of simple disagreements escalating to gun violence. On Thursday, a Detroit man shot 2 teens and 2 adults after his food was incorrectly delivered to their home. And on Saturday, an employee was fatally shot after a cutting in line dispute inside of a Greektown store. I convene a roundtable last week at the Bridge Detroit newsroom, and those activists say that the intent of the gun reform law that the governor signed last week doesn't do enough for Detroit. And so after the weekend that we've had here in the city, and the weather that we've experienced and the violence that's on top of everyone's mind, we knew that we could not come on the podcast and not talk about it and not name it. We just had a few days of warm weather. It feels like that this spring and summer is going to be riddled with this kind of violence, and I don't have words. I don't have words for it. It is a crazy time. You know, one of the things that a resident said to our reporter Malachi Barrett, because everyone is talking about, increased police presence, trying to use the presence of police as prevention. And what this resident said was, I don't want to hear about increased police presence, especially when we were talking about downtown and Greektown, where we had more than 100 patrol cars deployed over the weekend, and this violence still happened. So where do we start? How do we heal our community?
Well, people aren't killing people because there aren't police around.
Yeah.
I mean, shootings are not caused by the absence of police. They're caused by the absence of some type of emotional well-being and stability, right? Because you don't shoot people. You're feeling good. You're feeling good about yourself, and you're feeling good about life. You're not like, oh, let me shoot them. That got the wrong. I didn't ask for pepperoni pizza. I want a sausage, okay? When you have that kind of hair trigger temper, something else is going on. Mm-hmm. If you are cutting in line and somebody tries to stop you and it was an employee, a security guard who was shot, that's not because you...
Big D, that's his name.
Yeah, Big D. Mm-hmm. I love that name, D.
Daryl Stroughter.
And
let's say his name.
Much Daryl Stroughter. People loved him, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know him. People absolutely loved this man. Mm-hmm. But the reality is he was not killed because there weren't police there. They were killed because there was somebody there with some emotional problems and a gun. So let's talk about the emotional problems that are in our community, all of the trauma that goes unchecked and goes unchecked and goes unchecked. And people say, okay, well, you know what? Let's go ahead and fund all the police we can, and we'll worry about mental health once we get it under control with policing. And we never do.
I mean, we have this conversation every year. I remember that one year, I don't know if it was 2019, where every weekend we were seeing videos of violence taking place in Greektown, right? I don't know why Greektown seems to be, such a hot spot. But one of the things that folks were sort of pointing to as a win is this legislation that Governor Whitmer signed last week about, comprehensive background checks and red flag laws. And, I think that may go a long way toward quelling, mass shootings like the shooting that happened at Michigan State University. But, Alea Harvey Quinn contends that bill doesn't go nowhere near as far enough for Detroiters who are experiencing gun violence. And, my other question is around the physicality of this. Number, where are Detroiters getting guns from?
Well, I mean,
is there a gun shop in the city of Detroit?
I mean, the reality is that you have gun shops, and then you have people who go to gun shops, buy an untold number of guns and sell them underground, and we're not tracking them. But that's not the problem either, right? Yeah. I think we are looking at that as a problem. Now, it's interesting. Heather Thompson wrote a book, I'm Making the Motor City in the Age of Mass Incarceration. She wrote an article about that in 2013. That's U of M's own Heather Thompson, the author of Blood in the Water, who talks about the Attica uprising, and she's a brilliant historian. What she talks about is that the nation's war on crime actually undid all of these years of work in building power in Detroit through mass incarceration, the carceral state, and the realities of mass incarceration. Even now, we talk about, juvenile justice facilities present a mental health, it's a public health problem to house kids or warehouse kids in juvenile justice facilities. How does the county respond? By releasing young people? No. Mm-hmm. By adding 72 more staff, because this is going to solve the problem. We'll get more spaces and more people to incarcerate youth, and yet we know that incarcerating young people does the opposite of fix the problem of violence in our community. So I think that as much as I hate guns, and as much as I think we need to do better with our gun laws and close off access to guns, I also think that we need to do so much more with addressing trauma in our communities. And we talk about trauma in these silos. Let's talk about housing. Let's talk about, homelessness. Let's talk about hunger. Let's talk about joblessness. Let's talk about feeling shut out of society. And we talk about these things separately. We don't have enough therapists. We don't have enough compassion. We don't have enough love. We have people who are graduating from foster care and going straight into a community that has no place for them. But we don't want to connect that to the behavior of those people later on. And so I think if we're going to prevent violence, we've got to start fixing the hurts. And I know that Alea Harvey Quinn is also looking at other approaches to working with people who are killing people. She is a big proponent of what the mayor is now calling shot stopper, which I agree with her, is incorrectly named. And so I want to, give her roses for having pushed for crime intervention inside of communities. Let's bring churches and nonprofit organizations and youth programs together and say, let's put our arms collectively around these kids.
Let's talk about that when we come back. More on gun violence in Detroit when we return. Keep it locked.
Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that ask the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit, by Detroiters, for Detroiters.
Have you always dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Detroit Eastside Engaged Podcast Network, or DEEP for short, is here to make that dream a reality. Located inside the Stoudemire, the DEEP Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your podcast idea off the ground. Doesn't take a whole lot of work to get started. Just visit the Authentically Detroit page at ecn-detroit.org or call Sarah at 313-948-0344.
I think we should talk about that.
Welcome back to Authentically Detroit. Donna and I are having a conversation around the recent wave of gun violence here in the city of Detroit, and really sort of pinpointing, to, various root causes. As practitioners who do work in the community, we understand just the sheer amount of devastation and trauma and violence that is inflicted on Black bodies, whether it's economic violence, political violence, right? Disinvestment, severe disinvestment is a functioning form of violence. And we see, trauma show up and mental instability show up in the way that these folks are shooting and killing each other. I first off want to say that I don't think that I think it's a false equivalency to talk about selective outrage when it comes to Black folks killing each other and then how we respond when white folks who are part of the dominant caste system kills us, right? Because everybody wants to bring that piece up. And I want to just say that there are folks who work every single day who you don't hear about, who you don't see, doing the necessary work to provide the services, to folks who could have the propensity to participate in this level of violence. It's apples and oranges. So I'm not interested in having that argument, but Donna and I were having a conversation around the faith community here in the city of Detroit. And I'll go ahead and say it because that's what we do here. I think that to a large degree here in the city of Detroit, the faith community has been severely compromised by political interests. We see pastors on ads for development. We see pastors standing behind political figures on stages and in press conferences, supporting things that I think are sometimes antithetical to progress in our neighborhoods, right? And so when we talk about calling on the faith community, I'm like, yeah, we should do that. We were having a conversation earlier about prayer and prayer walks in a group chat of mine. But, is the faith community the bedrock it once was here in the city of Detroit?
So, I think that's an interesting topic. I think if you go back to the beginning of time, there's always been a difference and differences in churches, right? Mm-hmm. Every church does not serve the same purpose. About 20 years ago, it's probably more than that now, I was at a conference in Boston, and there was talk about big steeple and little steeple churches and the difference in how they function inside of the community. The little steeple churches, the smaller churches that don't have commuter congregations that service neighborhoods tend to have more of their hands on the problems of the people in the community. So these past 3 weeks, unintentionally for different reasons, Kevin and I have been to little steeple churches, and I really enjoy it. So we're just going to keep doing that for a while and visiting neighborhood churches, because you really get a different slice of what faith means. When you have a small neighborhood-based ministry, that prosperity conversation is not entering into the dialogue. You're talking about what's happening to people next door, and people's lives are being saved, and there's always been that. So I do want to shout out those little steeple churches that have come together and been doing the Lord's work for a long time and never stopped. Mm-hmm. But I also think there has been an effort by our government to recruit big steeple churches, big pastors, into this neoliberal economy, this idea that the church can become a housing developer and a community developer, and the church has the right to do that. And it sort of serves a Republican message to then say, or I'll say a conservative message to say, well, if people are prayed up and paid up, then bad things don't happen to them. And so if we want to save the community, let's get more people into prayer. Let's get more people into investing. And those things are true, of course, that when people are active in their faith life, a lot of times they're not doing other things that could expose them to violence. But it's also true that there are material challenges that people face: homelessness, hunger, mental health problems. I was at one church, and this man got up, and he's replacing a pastor, and he said, I walked out of prison and walked into this church, and the pastor told me, do some work around the church. And if you do some work around the church, this is Pastor Griffin, who just retired from Rose of Sharon. He told this man, who became an elder, and I believe he is now the pastor of that church, do some work around the church, because I'm going to keep you out of prison. And he's been out of prison all these years. Married, productive, loved, connected. That's what those small steeple in the neighborhood churches do. Now, Pastor Griffin is kind of well known, but he's not as well known as some. He's not one who's, and his son during his celebration talked about the fact that he was not about prosperity ministry. There have always been some who aren't doing that. Mm-hmm. Let's lift them. Let's lift those people who are doing it. But the other thing is, there are people of faith who aren't running churches. Mm-hmm. There are people of faith who are running nonprofits in the community, youth homeless shelters and other things. So that the idea that the only way that Jesus shows up is in a church, or God shows up is in a church,
that's facts,
is not true. Ideally, God is showing up in all of us, that's whatever facts. Our faith.
Yeah.
If you're Jewish, if you are Muslim, if you are Christian, if you're Hindu, God is God, and there is one God in my view. And so however you worship and celebrate God, as God shows up in you, you can be a service to the community. But, I don't think God is showing up. And no offense to my friends who are, police officers, I don't think he's showing up in a uniform with a baton, a badge, and a gun. I don't think that's God. I think that that's. I mean,
it's something. It is something that transcends the physical. I mean, if we I don't know how esoteric you want to get, but what we're talking about is a symptom that is not physical, but shows up in violence, right? A root that's not physical, but has a symptom that shows up in physical violence and gun violence, right? How do we begin to sort of chip away at what that root is, right? It's spiritual. It's something that's on the inside, right? It's healing. It's heart work. It's root work.
It is.
And that's hard. It's hard to do. It's you know what I mean? It's really,
when you look at what people have in common who are violently destructive and do these things, a lot of times what they have in common, there are two things that they lack: hope for change and faith in themselves and in the world to facilitate that. If you can help invest people with hope and change, they'll do the hard work. But that's always the unnecessary first step is I have to believe it's going to amount to something. And we have not been about the hope and faith business. That's what happened when that man walked out of that prison. He went into that church. He had hope and he had faith because somebody had faith in him. Sometimes you have to have faith in people before they have faith in themselves.
You know, I'm
You
always
have to
talking
see-
about how powerful a witness is. To have someone who sees you, who's willing to be a witness to your life and have that hope for you before you even have it for yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And so we need more of that kind of work. And it's not the kind of work that happens overnight. So the mayor has put together
It's a
this
long
shot
game.
stopper program. But the reality is change takes time.
Yeah.
All of us take time to change and grow. And it comes from the inside. There's no recipe for it. But there is this concept that a strong community puts its arms around people and the most vulnerable people are maintained within its midst. And we are less punitive. When I look at my childhood and I look at, I'm going to tell you a story. I don't know if I've ever told this story before, but when I was in college, I did not always get my tabs changed on time on my car. I was irresponsible. I did have a car. So I'm driving around Ann Arbor without my tabs changed.
Yeah, guts.
And this police officer gets behind me. So what do? Pull over? Nope. I go on a chase. And he follows me, and I pull into this parking lot on Plymouth Road in the little shopping area but over there by Rite Aid. And he stops me because, of course, I couldn't evade the police like I thought I could. And he has me on the car, and he puts my hands out, and he says, "You can't have your car tonight," and I go home that night. Today, I'd be in jail. If he didn't shoot me for trying to flee.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes. Truth, right? So I look at these young kids, and that was me, a black girl in Ann Arbor
At that time.
with dirty plates, driving dirty, and I lived, and I didn't get arrested. What would have happened to me had I been arrested that day?
No one knows.
Would my life have been the same?
I'm glad we don't know.
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is we don't need to know. We need to have the kind of love for people where we believe they can learn a lesson and change. And
You
there
know
were
what?
people who believed in me when I did not believe in me. And I'm sitting here now because of that. And so I try to believe in people who don't have that for themselves so that we can give them a future too.
And, I think it is incumbent upon those of us who are doing this work, whether you are in the social sector, whether you are a politician, even if you hold the keys to, the planning department and planning our communities and how they look, that before you act on your love for the physical space and the built environment, what should be required first is love for the people. And I have experienced people in all of these sectors doing this work that is supposed to help people, and they don't love the people.
I can't even tell you what that means to me to be hearing you saying that, because you don't know about our reorganization at ECN, but we're reorganizing. And so we are reorganizing, starting with the whole concept of strengthening our people is at the core of everything we do. We've got to make our people strong. We've got to heal our people. We've got to care about them. I don't care about how many dollars you've got invested in economic development, how many houses you've built if our people are not in them and benefiting from them, right? And we can't eat this idea that we can put you in a job and not heal your heart. You're not going to keep that job. You're not going to be able to be successful. And so we're back in the healing business at ECN. We're calling it out. We're saying that's what we do. We believe in that.
Love is required.
Again, love is required. I believe love is the most powerful thing there is. And I don't see how anybody who says they are Christian, and I'm thinking Christ is there, also does not talk about love. Okay? And so we don't have to call it out. Love is love, right? I can love you. I don't have to love you in the name of Jesus. I just love you, right? I think that we put ourselves in these boxes and we put ourselves in these churches. I remember in 1998, I believe, when I joined Second Ebenezer Church, And Reverend Van was preaching that day, and this is why I joined. He said the church is not within these walls. The church is in the community. And if we stay in here, we aren't going to get to the church. The church is on the streets where people are. Now, this is a building. And so that was a theology that I believed in. I was like, that's right. The church is everywhere. It's all of us. In fact, I'm reading the New Testament again and again, and I never heard about Jesus inside of a church. He was on the streets healing the masses, right? That's and so facts. We got to get out of there and be in places. And so I think we can't talk about gun violence. It sounds like, oh, wait a minute, you're changing the subject. But I believe if that man who had shot those kids for bringing the wrong food had been surrounded with healing spaces, and I'm not saying nobody loved him. I'm saying he was unhealed because healing sometimes requires some professional help.
Yeah. One of the things, though, I do want to bring up is that, this wave of gun violence for so many Detroiters who are experiencing and hearing about it, like I couldn't get home. I couldn't even get home Saturday night because of this. They had the exits blocked off and everything like that. Is that, there is a sense of urgency to do something about it in the interim. And we know that healing takes time. What does the interim look like?
I don't know that there is anything that you can do outside of that. You can't lock everybody up. Putting more police on the street does not make people less violent. Like you said, you're talking about Greektown. You can't take away everybody's guns because our nation won't let you do it. So what you have to do is work with the people who are there. And there are crime intervention strategies that have worked. We know the 10-point plan worked in Boston. Years ago, we have been loath to replicate that plan exactly as it was written, okay? Because in that plan, it was a faith community that came together and worked with various people in government and said, instead of sending this kid to jail, send them to me and I will mentor them and I will give them what they need. And the young person understood, I didn't go to jail because I'm here in this community center and I'm doing well.
Sending them to jail here.
There's a recipe for this. Now, whether or not we're going to build a cake with that recipe or we're just going to keep on just coming up with this, doing the same old thing, assuming more and more and more money in here is going to make it better, I don't know. But I do know that it's been done before. Violence has been reduced before. It doesn't necessarily take 100 years, but it's also not going to be eliminated tomorrow just because we've put money in policing. Even if you said, we'll put $100 million in policing, you got to hire them, you've got to train them, you've got to deploy them, and you've got to figure it out, even if that was going to work, and it won't. Even if we said, let's build more prisons, between now and the time that you build a prison, we could save some lives.
Yeah. There is no perfect button to put on this conversation, and I think that is, symptomatic of the issue that we're talking about. And so more to come on this. This will not be the last conversation that Donna and I have around this, and hopefully we will be able to bring in some of the experts who are doing this kind of work that we're talking about.
Let's just commit to bringing in Alea Harvey Quinn. Alea and I used to work together. I met Alea when she was 22 years old, and she was about the business of saving lives. She and Lottie Spady were working with me at Vanguard, working with young people from all walks of life, and their lives got better with love. And I also want to say this. I want to close this out. I'm a Christian. I believe in God, but my mother was not. And I got most of this belief in people from my mother. Not even from the Bible. I just said, well, listen, Jesus is saying what you're saying. I don't know why you don't believe, right? But my mother believed and had that strong belief in humans, the potential of human beings to change, to be good, to love each other. And if we don't start with that potential, then we're going to look for ways to lock them up and incarcerate them because we don't believe there's anything good inside of them. But when you believe that there is goodness invested in almost every human being, not everyone, but in almost every human being, then you will fight for that good part of them to be the part that emerges.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. I'm thinking about my childhood and, being at grandma's house. And those of you who've heard me talk about my grandmother really as a matriarch of not only our family, but a matriarch of community and love. That's where my frame comes from too, Donna. My grandmother is a God-fearing and Christian woman. But, I'm thinking about how the community would gather, how family would gather. And it wasn't always without conflict. There was always, there was conflict there. Sometimes there was, a threat of violence there. But love always overcame. And I don't remember anybody ever having to call the cops on anybody else because love always solved the issue. And I'm like, oh man, I've seen it done.
You know,
we can do it.
Kevin told me
We can do it.
he said nobody other than you ever told me they loved me as much as your mother.
Wow.
Okay, I love you was her language of love. Let's love people. Let's love people. And at the same time, I'm not saying I don't feel bad for the people who lost. Of course, my heart hurts for them. But let's love people anyway and believe in people. It concerns me that people are going to look at these violent incidents and do something that's drastic and severe. I was a little girl. My family went out of town. I was a little girl. And we came back in town and somebody had killed a whole family. And after that, you know, we had to lock our doors. There's a lot of violence in Detroit in the 1960s. This isn't new. I don't remember a time when Detroit did not have violence. In fact, Detroit
not in my lifetime.
Violence has been
not in my
a
lifetime.
problem that we have lived with my entire life. And Detroit's violence goes back long before I was here, long before it was a majority black city. There has been violence in this community. I mean, our Second Amendment is a gun. Okay, First Amendment is speech, and our Second Amendment is a gun, and people will fight harder to protect gun rights than they do speech rights. Because while we're banning books, you better not talk about banning anything on a gun.
More on this, y'all. More on this. More to come on this. Alea Harvey Quinn, you are invited. We're going to follow up with you to make sure that you are able to get here in the studio. If you have topics that you would like discussed on the podcast, you can hit us up on our socials on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Authentically Detroit, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. It is time for shout outs. Donna, anybody you want to shout out?
I want to shout out Phyllis. I want to shout out Phyllis because she has done such a great job in leading her nonprofit organization, Bridging Communities. When she got Bridging Communities, she talked about going with payless paydays and the challenges that she had. And look at it now. She turned it into a thriving community organization. So, Phyllis, we love you. And it's my shout out today.
My shout out goes out to my nephew. I can't imagine what it feels like to have a parent that is incarcerated. But that kid thriving at Grosse Pointe North in his grades and running track and winning track and hopefully making the varsity team, he really, really made my heart proud. I was really happy to see him win. So shout out to you, Antoine. Your uncle loves you, and I'm always going to be here with you and for you. All right, y'all, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Authentically Detroit. We'll see you same time next week. Until then, we want you to catch the wave.